Welcome to another of our Winter's Tales. This evening we will be reading A Village Christmas by Laurie Lee. Christmas today often falls far ahead of its time, with signs in the shops appearing soon after the summer holidays. But in my childhood, Christmas began at the proper season, only just before the feast itself. For us boys in our village in the Cotswolds, it always started on a star-bright night, never pre-arranged but intuitively recognised. A few of us would wrap ourselves in scarves and mufflers, fix lighted candles in jam jars, and go through the streets calling out the rest of the gang. Coming carol barking then. It was a declaration, not a question. One by one they appeared, flapping their arms and stamping their feet. We were a ragged lot, but we had official status, for we were the boys of the village choir, and as a reward for our year of dutiful church-going, we'd earned the right to sing carols at all the big houses in the valley and collect our tribute. Now, our band of musical footpads set off merrily through the crunching snow, swinging out lanterns on loops of string. We began with the squire, while, still in good voice, advancing his awe down his well-swept drive to his great house. The old man, wrapped in a rug, stood at the door and listened, weeping softly, as our Christmas trebles reminded him once more of the passing of time. After that regal visit, we hurried onward up the valley, calling at the houses of the lesser gentry. Beneath frosted windows, in echoing stable yards, under great Gothic porches and in tapestried hallways, we sang, 8 voices, clear and sweet, ringing out through the winter's night. Hark the herald angels sing. Once again, we were the bearers of the miraculous tidings to house and farm, to the folk by the fire, the stamping beasts in their stalls. And at each house, when we'd finished, we were rewarded with handfuls of coppers, hot mince pies, tangerines, gifts as precious as gold and myrrh. Next day was Christmas Eve, with preparations at a climax. The kitchen walls shone with reflected snow. Icicles curtained the steaming windows. As soon as we'd finished breakfast, the table was cleared for the ceremonial mixing of the pudding, a formal ritual only, for Mother had thoroughly mixed it already. But now each of us had to stir it for luck. It stood rich and raw in its china basin, packed with currants, raisins, nutmegs, ginger, and other musky, indefinable spices. We each gave the mixture a solemn stir, made a secret wish, then took a long hard lick at the spoon. I remember well that voluptuous taste of suet and of oriental bazaars, together with a faint flavour of the pudding cloth. Christmas in the country means feasts and fires, a few brief days of excess when even the poorest amongst us would confront the stern gods of winter with the bravest show possible of good living. Everyone was busy this morning chopping wood, carrying in logs, or sitting on the doorstep. Now the time had come for us to go to the woods and to collect leaves for decorating the house. Among the black and bare trees, we shook the snow from the undergrowth with frost-reddened fingers, seeking the sharp-spiked holly, bunches of laurel and ivy, cold clusters of moon-pale mistletoe. With these, our sisters transformed the family kitchen into a grotto of shining leaves, an enchanted bower woven from the twigs and branches sprinkled with scarlet berries. After tea, as darkness fell, we put on our coats and scarves and tripped off with Mother to the town several miles down the wind-whipped valley. We always left the buying of our presents to this 11th hour as part of the season's dramatic crescendo, joining the rest of our neighbours who were all by now heading from the shops to catch the last glitter of Christmas Eve. The tiny gas-lit stores were gold caverns in the dusk, bursting with festive goods. We children gazed a while at the grander toy shops, those with stuffed tigers and life-size dolls, but ended up, as always, at Piper's Bazaar, the most magical place in town. In this glittering emporium were presents for all the family, rings, necklaces and brooches for 1 penny each, tiny tea sets and dollhouse furniture, tin soldiers, cannons, paints and puzzles, Chinese lanterns and devil masks. For my mother I bought the best in the shop, a brass-framed photograph of Lanarkshire for sixpence. Home again with the oil lamps and the candles lit, we stowed our presents away in the backs of cupboards or behind loose boards in the washhouse. Later that night, a cousin, who worked in the woods, would leave a rather splendid Christmas tree at our door. We would haul it inside, plant it in a bucket and smother it with Chinese lanterns. Mysterious and sparkling, and still dripping with melted snow, its feathery branches filling half the kitchen, the tree was our Christmas crown. Everything was now ready for tomorrow. There was nothing to do except go to bed, curl up in our blankets and wait, each with his own long stocking hanging on the bedpost, empty. Would there be a flash of red in the window, a slow glint of beard and ermine, a whisper of sleigh bells on our rooftops as Father Christmas made his benevolent entrance? We suspended judgment and kept an open mind. And when it happened, it was like the opening of a flower in the dark, the sudden ripening of fruit on the bough. A minute ago there was just the limp dead stocking. Now it hung heavy, bulging with gifts. Of all moments in childhood, this must remain the most haunting, the most unforgettable. The drowsy hand in the cold of the winter's dawn reaching out as a test of hope, then suddenly finding itself filled with the weight of love bestowed silently while it slept. No matter how early it was, we sat up in our nightshirts, lit our candles and began Christmas Day. Slowly, we scattered our treasures across the bedclothes. The biggest toys came first, filling the mouth of the stocking, a clockwork fire engine, whirling with sawtooth cogwheels, followed by a boat, some dominoes, and a bright painted humming top. Here and there among this procession of simple joys, we'd find a wrapped bullseye, a Brazil nut, a russet apple, a couple of figs or a tangerine. Eager and impatient, yet longing to spin out the moment, we tried not to empty our stockings too quickly. We plunged our hands deeper, searching for the next surprise, trying to guess what it was by touch, hard or smooth, sticky, smooth, oblong, round or square. What ecstasies of speculation those fumblings were until one drew forth the object into the light. Then at last, it was down to the toe. It was over, that session of unalloyed bliss, like nothing else in life, the slow unwrapping of Christmas in the winter's dawn. Christmas dressing was formal. For the boys, velvet suits, starched collar and hair shining with Vaseline. For the girls, best dresses and new pinafores. We tumbled downstairs 3 steps at a time into the kitchen's glow. The fire was ablaze, and Mother had already started the breakfast, frying great pans of eggs and bacon. We sat down to the finest breakfast of the year, which included real cream and porridge. "Hark, children," cried Mother, suddenly cocking her head. "Isn't that pretty? Now, fancy that." With our mouths full of bacon, we ran out into the yard and stood listening in the snow. Then we heard it. The pealing of Painswick bells, the traditional and joyous sound, coming faint but clear over the distant hill like icicles stirred by the wind, ringing Christmas throughout our valley. Our own village hall and its bells started up soon after, cool as a snowdrop, calling us all to church. There were no dissenters this morning. Everyone turned out, from the gentry in their carriages to the farmers and their bonneted wives in carts. For us choir boys, there were new robes, cold as sheets of tin, which we donned hurriedly in the shivery vestry. Then, with pink cheeks glowing, faces modestly composed, sweets hidden beneath our tongues, we followed the snow-haired vicar to our place in the stalls to a resounding peal of the organ. "Unto us a child is born, unto us a prince is given." We sang it full-throated, knowing it to be true. And after a brief sermon, the vicar released us with his blessing, and the rest of the day was ours. Back home, we found that Grandpa had come, and a couple of whiskered uncles, all wearing brown polished gaiters. Eddies of tempting smells filled the crowded kitchen: mince pies, hot pastry, the tang of freshly chopped parsley, the tingling aroma of the goose, which was too big for the oven and hung on us outside on a spit turning before a roaring fire, its fat dripping into a small brass dish. Nothing could be hurried. Christmas dinner was sacred, and the waiting was part of its price. When all was ready at last, the table had never looked more beautiful. the decorated plates, paper napkins which appeared only once a year, the dishes steaming with vegetables, and the little willow-patterned saucers full of dates, of nuts and figs. We sat in our places, confidently clutching our knives and forks, knowing that this was one occasion when we could eat our fill, and when there would even be second helpings. Plates clattered up and down the table, returning laden with helpings of crackling goose. All over the village it would be like this. Families gathered for their feast of the years, proud and flustered mothers giving their star performances, the old and toothless blissfully chewing, the young gorging themselves, grinning fatly at each other, babies in high chairs sucking marrow bones. Finally came the climax of the meal, the pudding, steaming royally on its china dish, a great ball of glory as black as night, with a bunch of holly twinkling on top. Grandpa fished from his pocket a tiny medicine bottle of brandy, poured it over the pudding and set it alight. Whiskers of pale flame began to purr and flicker around it, dancing over the surface like tremors of lightning. We all cheered. Mother blushed. "I hope it boiled long enough," she murmured. Then she ladled it out with a fiery spoon, a great dollop for every plate. It was the last of the meal, a surfeit of richness. We searched each morsel for the lucky sixpence, and each child found one. To our astonished delight, the uncles had seen to that. Christmas dinner over, the elders slumped in their chairs, sipping ginger wine, their voices furry and sentimental. So we left them to doze among the orange peel and walnuts while we ran out into the snow-filled lanes. At this hour in the village, mid-afternoon Christmas, only the children seemed to be left alive. The boys trying out their pop guns, pelting each other with snowballs, or whizzing up and down on the frozen pond. The girls more sedate, showing off their bright new ribbons and lace-up boots. Night came early, and the valley and its woods closed in darkly around our house. Now was the time to light the tree, its branches loaded with tinsel, with silver cut-out moons and stars, and with the clip-on candles, each a living tongue of flame, building up a pyramid of dancing light. Mother put out the oil lamps one by one, and we stood hushed and entranced together, adoring the tree and its chaste white glare coated all over the frosty fire. The precious day was dying. We boys struggled to keep awake, our eyes shadowed like burnt-out candles. How could we leave the beautiful tree? We piled our toys at the foot of our beds, and Mother tucked us up, her shadow large on the ceiling, thrown by the beams of a single candle. As long as she was there, it was still Christmas. As long as she held the light in our room, the day somehow could not end. We clung desperately to this last moment. Then she left us, and the angle of the candlelight grew narrower on the wall, and finally went out, closing that day forever.